Hello. Welcome to Sex Therapists Shoot the Shit, brought to you by the University of Pleasure. I'm Dr. Tera Jansen, licensed psychologist and certified sex therapist.
And I'm Laura Rademacher, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist. And Tara, I'm looking at your fabulous face.
You too. This is really, I don't know where to look, if I'm being honest, if I'm looking at you or looking at me. So apologies to those watching that my eyes are oddly shifting back and forth. Yeah, we're here. We're on video. This is terribly exciting.
It is. So if you have been a longtime listener to the podcast, you might have realized it's all been audio before now. So this is a brand new step for us that we're learning how to do video with our audio. Now it's a vidcast. I don't actually know what we are anymore.
We're a podcast. We're going to pull it and have it just be audio. So I think we're still a podcast, but we're grossly behind. So now we're just
That's what we are.
Behind.
Just grossly behind.
We're just, what this is us getting kind of sort of up to date.
Yeah.
To where technology allows us to be, and we should have been a while back.
Yeah, please still expect the technology of at least 5 years ago from us. That's just set that in your expectations. We'd really appreciate that because we're working real hard just to get to that level. But here we are. And if you're listening to this in the normal podcast way, check us out. I think we're going to be on YouTube. And if you want to, you could watch this as video as well.
Yeah. You can see our faces and me desperately trying to make out what Laura's face is, because on my end, it's sort of an amorphous blob, her face. So
theoretically, it's all working just fine. And I won't be an amorphous blob on the video. But really, who knows? Life is wild.
Life is wild. So we'll see.
We just got to roll with it.
We are back, everyone. It's been a hot minute because Laura and I have been really trying to figure out technology. Let's be real. Technology and time. Time is always an issue.
And you had a big life change as well.
Yeah. That was turns out moving to New York City, I don't know if anyone's ever heard this, that it's not the easiest place to live. I don't know if social, that's ever been a part of the social dialogue at all.
Yeah, it was a big adjustment. I think so. It was a really exciting adjustment and also just a real big one.
Yeah, a real big one. So we've been figuring that out. But one of the things that we did think would be good for today, since we're sort of I don't know if we should call it relaunching, but maybe introducing maybe a new audience to our podcast. We thought that it would be good to kind of talk, of course, a little bit about what this podcast is and a little bit about our origin stories, because we do have guests. For anybody that's ever listened to any of our previous audio only episodes, we will often have guests on, right? So this is Sex Therapists Shoot the Shit. So typically we have other sex therapists or sexual health professionals or people in the world of sexual health coming on and chatting about their experiences. And the title is pretty accurate to what we do on this podcast.
Yes. Yeah, we just get to chat sometimes, which is nice.
Yeah, it's meant to be laid back fun. Right. Although, let's be real, we often always downgrade into the serious dialogue about the state of sex education in our country.
I know. We're going to try so hard to have fun. And also here's our rant. And also here's some sex education thrown in because we can't not
help ourselves.
Do that.
We can't help ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we can't help ourselves.
So you get kind of a mishmash of all of that. But I think it's kind of fun to get a little bit of education, a little bit of discussion with also a little bit of sexual health professionals just being human beings.
Yeah. Well, and I enjoy it, right? Because this is by far the least prepared I need to be for anything. And it really shows in my work. It really shows in the final product that I am generally unprepared. But do you want to talk a little bit? Because when guests come on, we'll often ask them about their origin stories, right? So I know that in our next episode, we have a lovely guest coming on and we'll probably ask them about their origin story. So it might be good to go back over ours.
I think
kind of our origin stories, what brought us into the field, all that
You
jazz.
mean you didn't want I was born on a cold and stormy night in the middle of the Midwest?
Yeah, I mean,
That wasn't what you
I
were looking
guess it
for?
depends on what story you want to tell.
Okay. Well, I'll probably just tell my career story then. That's fine.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'll go first. My origin story is I get a kick out of my origin story. Looking back, I kind of go, wow, how did all that happen? I was a theater major. Surprise, surprise, because we knew each other at that time. We were actually in the same program, although a couple years apart.
Laura was
And
cooler than me. She was absolutely cooler than me in school.
that's a
Were
wild thing to say.
we were like adjacent in years to one another. What were you, like 2 years ahead of me?
I think
Is that-
so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she was in like the cool experimental shows and like always wore dresses over jeans in a way
That's
that I
true.
found daring, very daring.
Look, here's the thing: you can always hop a fence if you have to. If you're wearing if you're wearing jeans under your dress,
Which
you
is
just don't
the
have to worry
most
about it.
Midwest thing that will be
It's the
said
most-
today.
It's very
You
important.
can always hop a fence if you need to. Where are you from? Wisconsin? Is that where you're from?
Yeah.
That's on point.
That's right. Well, it's wild that you think that I was, I don't know, in any way put together. I definitely was experimental. And one of the things I was trying to do was figure out, how will I live now? I'm graduating with my theater degree. How will I live? What will
Perennial
I
question
do?
of all theater majors.
Absolutely.
I can say that I was one. So
Right. Yeah, we both have had to figure that struggle out for sure. And I got invited to a sex toy party. I got invited to a party where someone was going to come and have a bunch of products and sell them. And I was like, well, this is fun and interesting. I'm going to go to this. And so I showed up the night of. In my memory, and remember this is many years ago now, I feel like it was probably all women there. And that was kind of a thing, at least for some sex toy parties. It's like, it's all women getting together, talking about sex. Isn't that fun? And everybody was in such a good mood and just laughing and having a good time, except for the person who was there to educate us about sex toys, who was angry and bitter and sad. And people, it was really, I mean, it was hilarious in a way, but it was also sad to have a room full of people who were so excited about this and saying, well, what do you think about this product? And she would be like, I wouldn't know. I don't have a boyfriend right now. Next. And like, I mean, seriously,
Sorry,
that's.
I don't mean to laugh at her misfortune that
I
she
know.
was upset and having a hard time, but like that's
Yeah.
sorry.
It's not the way you want to do that. No. And I was watching this going, well, hang on, I could do this. And I had all these feelings of excitement about how I could make this empowering for people. And, depending on what kind of party you go to, you're going to get varying levels of your person being able to actually provide education about sex toys, because it's just like any other MLM, really, with a lot of the companies where they just want you to sell. And so I was like, but I would really want to do this in an educated way. And I would want to tell people, we often don't get sex education and we don't have sexual information. And, you can tell my big dreams with this, right? So I started doing that. I had to learn on my feet a lot. There is nothing like being in a room full of people who can ask you any question they want about sex and having to be like, I don't know. That will be the next thing that I look up when I get home. And that's kind of how I learned.
Trial by fire, right?
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, we had a wonderful sex toy store open up around town, and they were great and all about education for everybody, people of all kinds of identities, very inclusive. And so I ended up working in that store, which was fabulous. And in doing that, I realized, hey, I think I want to do this more long term, because when people come into a store, you maybe get 15 minutes to maybe 45 to help them find what they need or to provide education. And I was just like, no, I think I want to see people longer term. So then I had to figure out how to do that. And I had to figure out how to go back to school and get my degree in marriage and family therapy. And I've never really liked that name. because I think it prioritizes certain relationships over others. But basically, it's a relational form of therapy. And from there, I went on to get certified by ASECT, the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, as a certified sex therapist. I wrote a book in 2017 with my good friend Lindsay Hoskins about how to work with pleasure issues when you're working in sex education or sex therapy. I've been in private practice now for quite a while, and it's been a really wonderful, weird ride.
By the way, we should always take opportunities to promo your lovely book. Do you want to tell people?
Well, hang on. I've got one on the
Do you
shelf
have
over
it?
here. I do. It's
Do you just
right
always
here.
Do you always have one in your bag, where you
No.
can like, it makes me think of those like 90s commercials where someone always has a bottle, a full-size bottle of salad dressing in their.
If I did that, the salad dressing would spill all over my purse. I don't know how people do that.
I mean,
would
I don't know.
absolutely spill all over.
There's somebody that was pulling it off, but I feel like no, but that was a Hollywood creation.
Yeah. No, I don't generally. And honestly, this is fun to show on video though, because it kind of looks like the cover of a vampire romance novel, doesn't
There's
it?
a little vibe there. Yeah. You were before, well, I guess maybe during
it was
time.
right in that time. It was 2017, so it was very Twilight heavy. But yeah, if you're a sexual health professional, you can look at the principles of pleasure, working with the good stuff as sex therapists and educators. So my latest project has been offering classes online for people. So if you're kind of in the mood for more sex education in your life, a lot of them are geared towards relationship topics. I have one about sober sex. I have one about sex after having a baby. I have one about rekindling desire in a long-term relationship. And all of those are available at classes.laurarademacher.com if you're interested. And I get to do this fabulous podcast with you.
You should check those classes out, everyone. They're great. Laura's an excellent teacher.
Oh, thank you.
I have learned.
I don't even wear dresses over pants anymore. Not that you could tell with this kind of view. I could if I wanted to.
Laura's an awesome teacher, and I highly recommend her classes.
Thank you.
I have learned from Laura many a time, and she is a very good patient teacher, and much better with keeping her words concise than me as a teacher. So
I actually don't think that's true. I've learned from you a ton.
So verbose. I use like 18 words where there should be one.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that though, because when I listen to you on the University of Pleasure, your other podcast, which I'm sure you're going to promo here in a moment, there are so many times when you say something that I feel like cuts right to the heart of a thing. And I just think, oh, that's such a great, concise, powerful way to say that. So I think you're selling yourself short a little bit here.
Thank you, Laura. Now, everyone, you see why Laura is a great therapist. She'll make you feel good about whatever.
It's all true.
This is Laura Rademacher, everyone. I can tell my origin story. I feel like it is significantly less organized and a lot more impulsive than yours.
I will say mine didn't feel organized when I was doing it, though.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it ever does.
Yeah. I as a psychologist as well, right? Like a lot of people be like, oh, what, I was asked in interviews and things and people, what made you decide to be a psychologist? And I was like, desperation. I mean, so like Laura, I also do my undergrad in like theater performance and mostly comedy. And I was actually living here in New York City in my early 20s and waiting a lot of tables. And I remember, there she is.
Well, hi,
that's
baby.
Telly. She's gonna spin around maybe 40 times or just twice because
you got to get it right.
And so I was in New York and waiting tables and kind of just over all of it, just like over auditions and, kind of trying the hustle of being a performer. And I remember, do you remember that HBO show In Treatment?
No, I didn't
watch
HBO.
it, by the way. Like, I didn't watch it.
But it was formative to your career.
Yeah. I saw like a like I saw like I was like channel surfing back when we did that, and I paused on an episode, and I went, I could do that. And I like literally that evening started researching like graduate programs in psychology and counseling, and then very impulsively took the graduate requisite exam, the GRE, and somehow convinced a very lovely school to let me in to do my
You
master's.
say
And then
somehow, but you actually are a pretty amazing scholar.
thank
This
you.
wasn't like a by the skin of your teeth situation at all.
But and I had always like one of the things that I'd always liked about being a performer and an actor was and I like to write, and I liked like writing stuff as well. But what I really always enjoyed was like people's stories, right? And hearing and understanding people's stories. So it really doesn't it's not actually that far of a distance. And I would love to tell you like I knew in the beginning, just because of who I am, I'm kind of an intense person. So I knew in the beginning, I was like, well, I'll do my master's and I'm going to probably try to shoot for a doctorate, because I just like, like day one, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that, because I just am kind of intense about things. And I would love to tell you that I'm like, and here's like why I chose sexuality. I honestly really despise boredom. And we talk about my boredom tolerance skills at a different time period. But I think I was like, what could I talk about for a long time and not get that bored with? And I was like, sex seems good. So, like,
It's a good choice.
and that's like kind of honestly how I like sort of started like seeking out like more training. And I knew pretty early on in my master's program that that's kind of what I had some interest in. And so I spent a lot of my education really like seeking out those training experiences and seeking out sort of that education in particular in context of like counseling and psychology. So yeah, I mean, I would love to tell you that this was all a very well formulated plan that I'd been thinking of for a long time, but in all honesty, it was sort of an impulsive plan that happened to work out pretty well, which I'm pleased with, because not all gambles not all gambles do.
Yeah, but I mean, do you want to talk about the U of M? Like, you had a really prestigious doctorate
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did a
postdoc
lovely
experience.
Yeah, I did a lovely 2-year fellowship after my I finished my doctorate at the what used to be called the Program in Human Sexuality at the University of Minnesota, and that program's been around a very long time. And it's now the Eli Coleman Institute in Sexual and Gender Health, or I think for gender and sexual health.
Good job getting
Sexual
that
and
name
gender
out.
health.
Yeah,
I think
it's a tough one.
sexual and gender health. Look it up. Okay, it's
You'll
at the
find it.
University of Minnesota.
It's out
Yeah,
there.
they keep changing the name. But it was called the Program in Human Sexuality when I was there, and that was. I mean, I had just worked with some really amazing supervisors and mentors who are still mentors to me to this day that I am beyond grateful for, and got to meet a lot of really amazing colleagues. And it was really my introduction into this world, and particularly sort of the both the clinical side and kind of more academic side of the world, like research side of the world. Not that I'm much of a researcher at all, but yeah, I mean, and that was amazing and frankly really formative for me in my training experience. And these days, I've done some program development, directorship, and work for big clinics, little clinics, and now here in New York, I'm mostly just doing private practice, and I have been doing at least a part-time private practice for a while. And I got to tell you, y'all, Laura Rademacher here is a real helpful resource if you're ever trying to set up a private practice. I think she needs to be a consultant for it. I've told you this before, because she's super helpful and kind and very calm. You're always very calm about it, which I really appreciate.
Here's a compliment that I will give myself. I'm pretty dang good in an emergency. I'm like one of those people that gets pretty calm in an emergency. And I think that for me, setting up my own private practice felt kind of like a constant emergency.
Yes,
And so it kind of feels that way. And so I think, yeah, I'm very, I think that kicks in when I talk with people about their private practices. Yeah.
You do a lovely job. Yeah. And I do also, This podcast is brought to you by the University of Pleasure, which is the other kind of flagship podcast that I started with Jeremiah James. And that's a much more like education. And Laura's been on it plenty of times, and lots of other sexual health folks as well. And it's definitely a more, I would say, entertainment education, but really heavy on the education part podcast. This one's more for fun. This one's more for shits and giggles.
If you tuned into this one thinking you wanted to learn some things about sexuality, it would be really great to go over to University of Pleasure as well. You'll get some of that here and you'll get a lot of fun here, but University of Pleasure is a great resource for, I wanted to say the basics, but it's not even just the basics. Some of it is really complex relationship
You know me, like I
stuff.
like digging into that complex stuff. Like we definitely get like really topic focused and try to like dig deeper into like particular topics. As much as Jeremiah loves like tips and tricks, I'm into that, but like, I'll give them. I'm happy to give them, but like you can find those in Cosmo, or you can find those in Men's Health, or you know what I mean? Like you can find those in a lot of places. I think having one of the things that I think we do here too, and I know that you're passionate about it as well, Laura, is like I like having nuanced conversations about sex and getting into the complexities of sex because that's where we all get lost.
Yes. Yes.
That's where, either a lot of joy or distress can be found. Is sort of in the cracks, in the complexity, where it's longer than a 2-minute dialogue or, this is part of why I'm so bad at social media. Like everybody, like it's kind of like your videos need to be 30 seconds or less. And I'm like, I don't know how to accurately represent this thing in a way that I feel really solidly conveys what I need it to say in 30 seconds. I have like a panic attack about it. It's just I'm not good at that.
It's too hard. It's too hard. And it can sound good. It's kind of like if you've ever been to a class or a training and you're like, wow, they made this really easy. And you walk out feeling really confident. And then you actually try to do something in your life and you go, why isn't it as easy in my life as this class made it sound? I feel like that's what all the really short clips about sexuality do. They make it sound really easy and really clear cut. And maybe some of that information is going to be helpful, but then you're going to get into your own life and go, why isn't this as easy as they made it sound in that, 30-second TikTok? That's probably too long for TikTok. That 10-second TikTok that I watched. Why isn't that translating to my life? So
yeah, I mean, and it is not to like hate on like short form things. I think that there's a lot of usefulness in them. And I think, like Laura, I've seen you do some videos that are shorter that I think are fantastic and they're really helpful. And so it's not about like, we shouldn't have those. I think it's great. Those are great. And, and how do we fill in the gaps with like longer sort of more thoughtful conversations about sex, which is, something I know that obviously you and I are doing every day in sessions, right? Like a lot of times, I don't know if you get this, Laura, I'm sure you do. Folks will maybe call you to like as a therapist to do a consultation to make sure that you're a good fit, which by the way, I recommend. I think it's fantastic. Absolutely do that. But then sometimes they'll ask you the question often, like, well, how many sessions is this?
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that. I find that question so difficult because for somebody, I don't know, maybe I've had some 2. Like I've had people that come in for 2 sessions and it's like, yeah, we cleaned that up. Like that was just maybe like sort of a pretty easy peasy, like, and then for someone else, it's much more complicated and it's much more nuanced and it's so hard to like always predict that well. And I always feel like I'm disappointing people or like I'm trying to get away with something when I'm like, I kind of need to talk to you more and for a little longer to help you kind of figure that out. Because there's also so much that's about what do you do outside of the session with what I give you? Right. And what are you able to do with it? And so it's because it's, I think maybe similar to you take probably a pretty collaborative approach. So we're kind of building this thing together as we go. But I know when people ask me that question, in the same way that I have a really hard time doing a 30-second TikTok video, my brain is like, well, I don't want to lie to you and say 3 sessions when I don't really even know you or how complex this is. Like, I don't want to ever mislead somebody. So yeah, what do you do?
Oh, I say something probably pretty similar. And I also let people know, you may be coming in to work on one thing, and we can definitely work on that thing. And then sometimes that leads to other things that you want to work on, or that connects to something. And now we're exploring a little deeper. We're doing a little bit of trauma work, or we're doing some family history stuff or something like that. And so it really just depends. And I think that's part of the difference between education and therapy, right? With education, you can kind of say, I've made a class. Here's the topics my class talks about. Here's what you can reasonably expect to get from my class. And from therapy, it's a little bit more, because it's, one-on-one, or like one therapist to one couple, or one therapist to one polycule, or whatever. It's a more individualized process. So in my mind, you kind of go where you need to go. But
Yeah.
clients always get to say yes or no to that too. Somebody could say, hey, we did figure out this connected to deeper stuff, and I'm not ready to dig into that right now.
Or it doesn't
So
feel
let's,
relevant, right? I just don't
right.
want to.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't need to right now.
yeah,
Totally. You can always choose.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, and it's interesting. I know you and I have had this conversation other ways before. A lot of people don't know what sex therapy is. And so a lot of people might come into sex therapy feeling like they can only talk about sex, and they have to keep it in this like really tiny little box. So like one of the things, just having been in practice for many years now, like in the beginning, I'm like, sex therapy is just therapy. Just
Yep.
there's more
Yep.
kind of maybe space or capacity to a certain degree to maybe talk about sex in here. And like maybe there might be some things that are more specific around sex, or specific interventions, but like it's still just anyone that's a certified sex therapist is a certified mental health practitioner, meaning that they've probably done a lot more education in general mental health.
Yeah. They have a
and
license in some form of mental health. You have to have a license in some form of mental health before you can even become a certified sex therapist.
yeah. And so I think that like giving people permission to even feel like they can talk about things, but and usually it's not only do I want to give people permission, but I am like, well, sex happens in context. So, sometimes you can like keep it pretty confined, but like oftentimes it's pretty hard to be like, shh, nothing else about the rest of your life.
Right. Right. Yeah, that would feel weird.
Yeah.
That would be difficult.
I mean, do you see that? Have you ever had clients that have struggled with that, where they feel like they have to kind of keep it really contained to just the sexual?
Sometimes I think what I see more often is people who come in wanting to talk about sex, and then they spend all their first session talking about other things because they can't figure out how to talk about sex, and they can't figure out what to say, or they worry they're going to say it wrong. So, I mean, this is just definitely, I think this, for many, many of us, sex is not the easiest topic. And we also don't really know how to handle it socially. And people often don't know how to handle this topic in a therapist's office, which is okay. You don't have to know. You can just,
That's our job. That's what you're paying people
we
for.
walk
You're
you
paying
through that.
Yeah, like that's our job, right? Like we're supposed to be like, no, this is like let's do that, and ideally, collaborating on that together as well. But yeah, Laura, I think
Absolutely.
there's always the gray in the middle, but like to your point, that's also maybe a side of it, right? With people coming in feeling really nervous, or also not knowing what's appropriate. I think that's people are
trying to figure out how to say what they want to say, which actually is another great thing you can get from podcasts. I tell my clients to listen to sexuality podcasts all the time, because I think just hearing other people talk about sex, whether it's professionals or whether it's just people talking about their own sex lives and their sexual experiences, we actually, on average, don't tend to get that much of it, especially if we're not seeking that out. So I think it can be a really helpful thing. And I think it's part of what we want to do in this more casual format is, yes, we're sex therapists. Yes, we're going to talk about sex therapy sometimes, but also we might just talk about sex sometimes, and it might weave in and out of our lives and the topics that we're interested in a kind of a similar way, because we're whole human beings, and sex isn't the only thing we like to talk about either.
It's true. Sometimes I actively am like, I don't need to talk about sex more today.
I don't want to do this today. Yeah,
I'm good. I got a pretty big bandwidth for it, but I'm good some days. Speaking of other topics, we should probably take a break, but I do know what this is the sexiest teaser. We should come back and talk about perimenopause because
I can't wait. It's going to be so
I
hot.
just imagine like whatever like 7 people we have that are starting to look at this video being like, and maybe. Ooh.
Look,
but perimenopause is important and it affects a lot of people.
We need to talk about
and
it.
we are right in that right age range, you and I.
Hooray! All right, well,
So-
let's take a break and then let's get to the hot topic of perimenopause.
Let's do it. And we're back here to just blow the roof off talking about, I mean, this is, like.
What's been happening for you? So we started when we just did our basic hi, hello before we started recording and we were brainstorming what we wanted to talk about. This topic started to come up and I was like, I want to talk about it because I'm in the middle of it too. So what's going on for you?
Yeah. So reminder, this is Sex Therapist Shoot the Shit. So now we're really getting into the shoot the shit here part. So yeah,
That's right.
I think that I'm starting to have, I'm in my early 40s, right? And I'm, for some people, perimenopausal symptoms happen earlier, some people later. But I am really noticing what I can only describe as real bummer of some hormonal a real bummer of some hormonal shifts for me. Definitely the hot flashes while like waking me up like nearly every night. And like I'm somebody that's perpetually cold. Like I have like really low blood pressure, and so I'm that obnoxious person that's like, can we please turn the thermostat to 76? And everyone's like really upset with me and angry with me, like I love New York City because most things are on a radiator, and so it's easier to like not argue about temperature as much. So,
nice.
It'll take people longer to notice, but if someone used to, like walk by my old thermostat and it's like 78 degrees, like what are you doing? I can like sort of, I guess, gaslight people a little bit into being like, oh, I don't think it's that hot. Oh, here, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's, anyway, yeah, like that. But then I have a history of chronic migraines, and like there's a lot of things that kind of trip my migraines, but they were a little better, I would say, from like mid 30s to like 40, and then in the last like year and a half or so they've like come crashing back in a way that feel very hormonally linked, which is a bummer. I was like, oh, and I won't lie, like my tolerance for them, and let's be real, a lot of folks struggle with chronic pain, especially a lot of folks with estrogen in their bodies will struggle maybe in higher degrees. That's not to say people with testosterone do not, but I mean testosterone prominent, right? But yeah, I definitely think that it's been just having like both an impact. I think like some of the like I would say normative nuances that you would see with perimenopause, but then also like some of my chronic health stuff with like migraines and other sort of things are a little bit more hormonally linked as well. And so like that's just a real bummer. And I don't have the distress tolerance around it that I'm out of practice. There we go. My distress tolerance is a little bit out of practice for it.
It's a lot though. I mean, I feel like I have been in perimenopause for quite a few years now. And I'm also in my early 40s, but I have some health conditions that might make that happen a little earlier for me. And at first I was like, okay, this is not great. Do not love. Sweating at night, waking up more at night was one of the first things that I noticed. And then over really a couple of years, it got a lot worse. I hate to say that.
Great. I mean,
now,
I work with so many clients, that are having these kind of struggles. And I won't lie, sometimes I'm like, I'm not looking for, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to look forward to, but that specifically is not something that I'm real jazzed about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that is good to know is that eventually you get through the cycle and you get to another side and people seem to feel a lot better, right? So, I mean, this isn't a forever situation, but it can be a many years situation. And I'll just be honest and say I'm on hormones now. And I'm so happy, so happy. The first day, okay, this is a real deal story. The first morning that I took my first birth control pill, because at least for me, I was told that since I was under 50, birth control pills were the safest way for me to get hormones. I think maybe if you're over a certain age. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But that's what they told me to do. So I was like, all right, steps to like get some laundry. And I found myself running back up the stairs, carrying the laundry, singing Eye of the Tiger under my breath. And I was like, this can't be happening this fast. This can't be this good this fast. But it really felt that way for me. It
Yeah.
really did. And I still have some symptoms, and it's still not completely comfortable, but it's so much better than it was. And everybody should make their own medical decisions.
Do we know
You
an
should talk to your
endocrine?
doctor.
Yeah. Do we know an endocrinologist? We should get one on this podcast
We should look for somebody. That would be great.
because
That would be
hormones
great.
are tricky, right? Like we kind of like I think simultaneously underestimate the impact of hormones and then also overestimate, right? Like I'm sure as a sex therapist, Laura, like when people are coming in and they're talking about sex drive, people are like, it must be my hormones, you know, like there's certain things that like we kind of overgeneralize like hormones to be a part of, in which case, right, like hormones can impact your sex drive and libido.
But it can be a lot of other things too.
And so can a crap load of other things.
Yeah.
So like
That's right.
there's certain things that I think we get overly focused, and then there's other ways in which we don't like maybe really honor like the impact of that. And my understanding, and I'm certainly not an endocrinologist, but my understanding is like there's a lot we don't really understand about hormones and the way that they kind of can interact and behave with sort of other medical variables.
But I mean, so getting it back into the territory that we can actually talk about, one of the things that I noticed was brain fog and losing a lot of words, which is hard in this line of work. Like I could just feel that my brain was functioning differently and not in a way that I was appreciating. It was wild. That was a really wild change. And I think it affected my mood too. I was just um a little bit not as generally happy as I had been. So there's a lot of changes that can happen with this.
Yeah, I think that the like that, like brain fog, brain fatigue, those kinds of things, like I think that those are so much of like I think also stuff, when I talk about things get overgeneralized, a lot of times like I think vague medical symptoms like that will sometimes get maybe all thrown in the bucket of stress. Everyone's like,
Yep.
you're just stressed, right?
Yep.
And it's like, well, are you living in this world? I mean,
Right.
right. Things are kind of and often stressful.
I was going to say, I'm always stressed, especially, the past 6 years. I feel like I'm always stressed, and this was different than that.
Yeah, like usually we
Yeah.
notice the difference because like a lot of us, I mean, life can be chronically stressful, right? And so like
Yeah.
if you're noticing things with your body that feel outside what your sort of norm is, like, like there's maybe sometimes not, maybe sometimes it is the stress, but like sometimes I think it's worth sort of like acknowledging that experience enough. And this is maybe where I make the plug of like finding a healthcare provider that you feel is a good fit for you and really takes you seriously in terms of your concerns, and you feel like really hears you on that.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes that might take trying some people out, for a little bit.
So many people, so many medical professionals don't get much training around perimenopause and menopause, right? And so you might be talking to your gynecologist who is great at delivering your kids that you had or helping you with, when you had HPV and what do we do about that? Or, you might have a doctor who has been wonderful who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of training around menopause. And so, one of the things I do with clients is often like help people prep for their doctor's appointments, which is like, because it can be overwhelming to people. Sometimes people have some medical trauma. Sometimes people are worried they're not going to be heard. And so I kind of like help people make some lists about what are the questions you definitely want answered? What are the topics that you want to bring up? And I would just say to people, don't be afraid to directly say to your doctor, could I be experiencing perimenopause or menopause symptoms? You know, are
Mhm.
these things that I'm concerned about possibly related to any of that? Because I do think a lot of times, Tara, like you said, sometimes these symptoms are kind of chalked up to other things, and menopause gets forgotten. Oh, and another one that happens is people who have ADHD often find that their symptoms increase around perimenopause. I've known a lot of people who have gotten diagnosed around this time in their life because they could kind of cope for a lot of their life. And then perimenopause just upped their symptoms to the point where they were like, wait a second, maybe I need to, go in and get tested for this because it really seems like something is different. So
Mhm.
it can be big changes, big relationship changes if the way you approach sex or your body feels really different and then your partner is feeling some kind of way about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like sometimes too, like people might have to practice their sexual communication skill set until later in life.
Yes, that's
Um,
right.
and so, like, one of the things I'm sure you talk to people about this too, but I'm always like, one of the things I always talk to clients about, especially if they're like a young, like maybe at a younger age range, like in their late 20s or early 30s, and they're like maybe having some sexual struggles and they're kind of learning how to communicate about them. And I was like, don't worry, your peers will, if they're not now, they'll at some point they're gonna have to learn because
Yep,
age is coming for us all.
that's
All of
right.
us at certain points in time are gonna have our bodies not work the way that we want them to work, and we're gonna have been like, I really needed you to go direction A and you went direction B, and learning how to like talk about that stuff, like for legitimately, some people really don't like for I don't know, maybe luck, probably like for whatever reason, they don't have to really maybe really like kind of consciously sort of attend to that
Yeah.
until older age. And then all of a sudden they're both going through it and having to like navigate that. And that can be stressful, which is really my shameless plug for what probably we always plug, which is like, so start talking now.
That's
start,
right.
start
Look,
learning how to talk now.
talking is the biggest key, right? Communication is one of the biggest keys to having the kinds of sex that you want to have and finding the pleasure you want to have. And it's one of the things that's going to help sex be great at whatever age you're at, if you want it to be.
Hmm.
Lots of people do want to be sexual into their older years, and lots of people are very sexual into their older years. And if that's something you want, then you should be communicating and, being kind and compassionate and flexible around everyone's body needs. Just because something might be different than the way it used to go doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be less pleasurable.
Hmm.
So remembering that, like, you can flex.
Yeah, and I just want to like, uh, it's so rare that we can. I feel like it's hard, right, these days. I think sometimes there's a lot going on, and it's hard to like give shout outs to humanity. But I want to say that I don't know what's happening, but I'm pleased with it. I've been having so many more clients coming in with like sexual concerns that are like being like, but my partner's being really wonderful about it. And like I feel like there's I think this like collective effort to like increase like social dialogue about sex, to increase sort of like awareness about sexual issues. Like I feel like it's starting to like catch up a little bit. You know what I
I
mean?
love it.
I don't know.
Yes,
I just want to like take one moment to be like, hey, like and I don't know, maybe
absolutely.
I'm just on a good run, but I've had like a number of people like coming in and being like, you know what, my partner's been fantastic and we can really talk. And I'm like, it's great.
I
Good.
love it. Yes, no, I would agree with that. I think there have been big, big strides. When I think about the kind of conversations I was having in the beginning of my career versus the kinds of conversations I have now, I do think there's a lot more awareness of how to talk to each other, how to be flexible, how to remember that there's not just one way to have sex or be sexual. And, you and whatever partners you have can find whatever works for you and your bodies. Again, if you want to, right? You
Mhm.
don't even have to want sex. That's okay. You can do whatever you want to with that.
I feel like today's episode, while just introducing people to us, but like this little snippet here, I was like, yeah, this is what I was talking about. We cannot help a soapbox. Like we
I know, here
really,
we are. We're doing the thing again.
we can't
It's
help
a
it. There was an episode, if you want to go back and listen to our audio, where we really talked about ghost sex for a very long time. And I was really proud of us for just staying with
Look,
that.
we
And
can bring ghost sex back.
ghost sex.
We
Yeah.
can, or, there's lots of supernatural sex topics that we can bring in.
Yeah.
You don't look super excited about it, though,
No, I'm
Sarah.
just like my mind was like, God, how lots of
So many.
supernatural sex topics. I feel like
Don't
I'd have
challenge
to
me.
lead
I'll
the
bring
chart.
so many.
You're on. Please do.
Okay. No. Don't. You don't want to lay that challenge. No, we'll find good topics to just actually shoot the shit about. In
Yeah.
fact, I think our guest next time, I think we might be talking about just kind of like adulthood and what's it like to try to have hobbies again after maybe you've spent a long time developing your career, or maybe you've had kids and you lost all your free time for a while.
Or your friends.
Or your friends.
I mean,
your
for
will
real, that's
to
a
do
legitimate
anything.
That's
Yeah.
a legitimate struggle, right? Like, you
It
know,
is.
relationships are like plants. You need to water. And like if you have to like pull all your energy at like home and career or whatever it might look like, you know, friendships might be impacted. I
That's
feel like I
very
have
true.
so many conversations with people and like maybe they're like as their kids get a little older, like teen years, and they start to have like a lot more time, right? Or maybe they don't have kids, but their careers, or like maybe both, and being like, how do I make friends as an adult? And I'm like, good question.
It is. It's a weird thing. It's a really complex topic, and I think you can tune in next time and hear us talk more about it with our fabulous guest.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
I am excited to figure out how to get my eyes to stabilize during these recorded.
I think just worry about it less.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I don't think anybody, even if
I
people are
normally-
watching
this
this, I don't
recording-
think they're watching us that close.
Yeah, like I think that I'm used to being able to not have myself on the video, and I don't know how to make myself go away on this one, right? Like
Yeah.
on Zoom. I'm one of
Yeah.
the people that I don't like to see myself. And because if I do, like I'm always like looking back at me and then I look weird. So I'm gonna have to figure that out on this one.
You know what you're having? Do you remember some of the very first theater you did and that problem of like, I don't know what to do with my hands? Like that ultimate awkwardness of like you suddenly are so aware of your hands in a way that you never were, and your arms feel all stiff.
Mine was always more my feet.
Really?
But
You didn't know what to do with your feet?
Like whenever people would say like cheat out, I'd be like, my feet would just be in really weird.
Your feet would
like
stay?
the most unnatural. Like I remember in high school, like there'd just be like times where my director would be like, "What are you doing with your feet, Tara? Why are they like? That's not a direction that a human would put their feet." Like, I had a much harder time. I had a much bigger foot problem than hand problem.
Well, mine was my hands. What do I do with my hands? Why are my arms feeling
Like very,
like
very
robot
Ron,
arms?
Ron Burgundy, where it's like.
No, they'd just be straight down at my sides. Like I'd just be standing like whatever, but I'd just be so aware of them that I'd be like, do I splay my fingers apart? Do I put my fingers together? Do I ball them up? Should I put them in my pockets? Like, you know,
What I hope
we're
you
just
did
self-conscious.
is what I hope you did is a wide finger splay, just like that, or at your sides, because I think that's the most natural hand position for all people.
That's why I got cast in all the experimental stuff and you got cast on the main stage, because I was doing weird robot hands. And the experimental people were like, that's so weird. We like it.
I did a couple of experimental ones. I did.
Yeah.
I did a couple. I laid under a tarp of mud. Yes,
you have to. Isn't that a requirement to get the degree? I'm pretty sure.
I was in a unitard and under a tarp of mud. So all I know is that I earned something.
That's
earned
good.
something.
Oh, well, it's been fabulous to see your face.
You as well, as splotchy and amorphous as it is, the spirit of you is behind it, Ebony. I know and
Well,
believe that it's you.
we'll get used to this. We'll get used to this someday. So thank you for joining us for our new experiment. If you're watching this on video, thanks for being here for our first try with this. And if you're listening to it, like always, thanks for putting up with us, wading through this new component to it. It's gonna be great.
Well, I look forward to talking to you soon, Laura. And yeah, this was fun. We'll figure it out. I'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. That was Sex
Fine.
Therapist Shoot the Shit. We did it.
Yeah, excellent. And don't also forget to check out our flagship podcast, The University of Pleasure, which is still not on videos, but Jeremiah and I have been promising it for 3 years. So eventually
Someday.
I will have the same set of problems there. All right. It's
Looking
good to see
forward
you,
to it.
Laura. Bye.
Good to see you. Bye-bye. Like some education they can access
Sorry,
in their
Laura.
home.
What? I don't know if you saw as me doing your book. I started going, because what happened? I started having a full level freak out because I didn't have to acknowledge it because I realized I was on video, right?
Yeah. No, what
The-
happened?
The music we were trying to figure out earlier started playing like crazy loud in my headphones. And I was like, so anybody, I don't know if you're going to keep this in or not. Watching this, you're like politely promoting your book in a very professional way. And I'm on. So anyway, that's what happened.
Beautiful.